My name is Jason, and this is Just Watches. Now, I've been wanting to compare the Seiko Sarb and the Seiko Sarx for quite some time now, and today I'm finally going to do it. But I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to reflect on the fact that my channel hit 1,000 subscribers. So to each and every one of you, thank you. It's a really exciting and honestly humbling milestone. I don't have really any grand aspirations for this channel. It's just something I kind of do for fun in my spare time. But I've been really encouraged by the fact that people are watching and commenting, and I've been having fun chatting with you guys in the comment section below. So thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all I'll really say on it now. I might have a separate video kind of documenting my thoughts on it. But for now, let's just continue with what we do on the channel, which is review watches, watch news, and comparisons. So on the left, we have the Seiko Sarb. It's a pretty famous watch. It probably doesn't need any introduction. Unfortunately, it's discontinued and it's getting harder to find. But at the time that you could get it, it was between $300 and $400. On the right, we have the Seiko Sarx055. Now, this is sometimes referred to as the Baby Grand Snowflake, and it's slightly more than double the price. These are going to run about $900 to $1,000. So the question is the Sarx worth the additional money? Well, I'm going to document the differences, and you can decide for yourself. So we can start with the case. Now, I've always liked the case on the Sarb. It has this step design where the bottom is high polish and then it kind of steps up to this brushed finish. It's very well done and it's very unique for a watch. I haven't seen another watch that has a design like that. But what you'll notice about on the Sarx, and remember this watch is made of all titanium, the case and the bracelet, which I've heard is very hard to finish to these levels, is that the polished surfaces on this watch are basically a mirror finish. And the transitions between the different surfaces, you have brushed on the top and polished on the side, are razor sharp. They're just a little bit more refined than the ones on the Sarb. Now, part of that is a style choice. The Sarb is a little curvier, where the overall watch of the Sarx, especially with the lugs, is more angular. However, you're going to notice this when we move on to the bracelet. Now, the bracelet on the Sarb is good. You have solid end links. You have nicely finished, they're polished links with high polished sides, which kind of plays into the motif of this step pattern on the case. And you do have a milled clasp. Two of the things I've never really liked about the Sarb bracelet is there is a pretty big gap where the clasp closes. That's a little bit unsightly. Now that's going to be on the back of your wrist. No one's ever going to really notice that, but it's one of the details that they kind of fix on the Sarx. It's not going to be present there. The other thing is the first gap between the end links and the bracelet has always been kind of bigger, at least to me, and I don't really ever liked how that looked. I think that's a little bit unrefined. It a little bit feels like the bracelet isn't quite right. The end link was never quite right for the bracelet. Like, you can see how much bigger that gap is compared to the gap on the second link, and that always kind of bothered me. Now, and when you move over to the Sarx bracelet, you're going to see it's just higher. It's a higher level of finishing. There's more geometry to these links. The mid link is really interesting. It has high polish on the sides, and then it kind of steps up across the top and then steps back down. Meanwhile, you have these nice rounded, all brushed links on the side, and you're going to notice better integration. There's not really that bigger gap right at the end link, and this is also going to have solid end links. And then the other thing that this is going to lack is the clasp is just perfectly flush with the watch itself, so you don't have that gap at all. The one downside is there's no micro positions on this watch. Now, I was lucky, there are half links, so I was able to get a good size, but keep that in mind. I've heard people have had problems getting this to fit because of the complete lack of micro adjusts. However, it does make for a very pretty bracelet. The clasp is very small and very clean and totally flush with the rest of the bracelet. And that's really going to be a theme with a lot of these categories. It's just a little bit nicer overall. Now, the crystal on the Sarb is sapphire, so that's nice, but it doesn't have any anti-reflective coating, so it will catch reflections. What you'll notice, especially on the Sarx, is they do this thing called a super clear coating. And we're in the same lighting conditions. You can see how this doesn't really catch reflections. And if you get it just right, sometimes when you're holding the watch, it's going to be a little bit hard to do on the camera, but it almost looks like the crystal is missing. It's just a really good execution of anti-reflective coating, and it's just that much better. The sapphire crystal is just enhanced by the fact that the anti-reflective coating is so good you can see more details of the dial. And let's talk about the dial, hands, and indices. Now, it's all well done on the Sarb. You have applied indices, there's a little bit of loom, and they're patterned. They have faceted edges and kind of this line down the middle, so they catch light. I've always liked the hands. They're gabled, so they catch light on either side, depending on the lighting conditions. And they have loom down the middle and this white strip down the very end of the watch. It just increases legibility. And then you have that charming needle nose second hand. I love that. Basically, or sewing needle, I guess. Second hand that's sweeping around. So it's a really charming, it's a really classic dial. Really classic indices, just classic design overall. But then you move on to the Sarx and you just have this really cool like frozen ice dial. It looks like a frozen lake maybe to me. And then the indices and the hands are just that much better finished. They're also gabled, but you can see they're so high polished. They're this perfect mirror surface basically, and they really catch light on one side or the other. You can see the light playing across the hands and all the indices. They're just refined to a much higher level. And when you have them side by side, it becomes so obvious that it might not be as obvious like in pictures, but when you do have the watches together, you just notice that the indices and the hands and the dial are just finished to a higher level. So both the crowns are signed. The Sarb has this deeply etched S that's very cool to look at. I love that detail of this watch. The Sarx is just slightly more refined. Not only does it have that deeply etched S, but it has this raised portion. So it's a little bit more complex of a finishing process, and it's just a little bit nicer of a crown overall. So that brings us to the last category and the major complaint against the Sarx. It's the movement. So the Sarb has the Sarx055. It's an in-house 21,600 vibration per hour hacking and hand winding movement with a Sprawn mainspring that provides 50 hours of power reserve. What's the movement in the Seiko Sarx that costs 2 to 2.5 times the price? It's the same movement. It's the Sarx055. So that is what people complain about. They think you should get a nicer movement in this watch. I think I would like to see a different movement in this watch. They've introduced the Sarx035, which is the 70-hour power reserve of the Sarx015, but I think what people were really hoping for was a higher vibration per hour, maybe 28,800. It would provide that smoother sweep. But I think what I've pointed out today is that the difference in the price is really in the overall finishing of the watch. If that's something you're interested in and you don't care about the Sarx015, I think this could be worth it for you. However, I do understand the complaints that it just only has a Sarx015. Why did I get the Seiko Sarx? Well, for me, it was just kind of an emotional purchase. One of my grails is the Seiko Snowflake, the spring drive Grand Seiko version, but I'm not really in a position to spend that much on a watch right now, so I saved up and got this one, and it's really been scratching that itch for me for a while. I did get a chance to handle the Grand Seiko Snowflake, and it's obviously way better than this one, but for now, this is going to tide me over, and maybe the Grand Seiko Snowflake spring drive will be one of my long-term grail watches. So those are the primary differences. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think the Sarx, the finishing of the Sarx is worth the additional cost, without considering that they have the same movement? Or do you think that it's just way overpriced? I think you can't go wrong with the Sarb. I don't think you need the increased finishing in the Sarx, but it is there and it is nice and it is apparent when you have them side by side. So let me know what you guys think. Would you go for the Seiko Sarb or the Seiko Sarx? I mean, it might be too late. The Sarbs are kind of washing up. I don't know how much longer they're going to be around. The white dials seem to still be available on Amazon at the time of this video, but I couldn't find a black dial on there. So we'll see what happens going forward, but those are the primary difference between the Seiko Sarb and the Seiko Sarx. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed those comparisons. As always, if you're enjoying the content of this channel, please subscribe, and if you like the content of this individual video, give it a thumbs up. Alright, I'll see you next time.